online, on Radio Player, and on 106.6 FM. This is Wycombe Sound, the Wycombe Wanderers Show.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Wycombe Wanderers Show during an international break. You might think, well, that's all very well and everything, but what have you got in store for us? Well, Bob and myself have a pretty packed hour, I must say.
Yeah, it is going to be a very good one. Just, don't be tempted to go and watch England against San Marino.
No, this will be much better entertainment, I imagine.
Definitely. It's San Marino. I find it slightly annoying. It's like England playing Marlow. What is the point, really?
I think some of them are sort of plumbers, aren't they? Things like that.
Yeah, well, I think they all are, aren't they? Pretty much. No disrespect to San Marino, and I apologise if you are a San Marino fan, but yes, it's a bit of a non-event, really.
Absolutely. So yes, listen to this show because there's lots to look forward to, including Gareth Ainsworth, not Southgate's, thoughts on the definitely draw, wasn't it, against Coventry. I've had some stick today because there's been an error recently with the
yes. Well, it was fair enough. We hadn't done very well against Coventry previously, and also it wasn't exactly the most exciting game. So the fact that you thought that we lost to them, I think we'll forgive you. Later on as well, we've got a surprise appearance from a former Wycombe Wanderers player. Tell us more. Yes, indeed. We'll be speaking to, or I spoke earlier on, I should say, to Dion Dublin. Fairly strangely, I was speaking to him about fraud. Of course, yes. Yes, yeah, of course. As you would. Going to speak about fraud. You'd think, well, who should I speak to? Should I speak to like the Commissioner of the Met Police? No, I'll speak to Dion Dublin. Anyway, I did have a short chat to him about Wycombe Wanderers, so we'll be playing that bit of the interview. Don't worry, you won't have to sit through the fraud bit. No, but that is available on the Listen Again feature on the website for this morning's mid-morning if you'd like to hear Dion's fraud thoughts. He was. Don't fall for any scams. Listen to Dion Dublin. Also coming up this hour, we'll hear the thoughts and memories of long-serving former Wycombe Wanderers physio David Jones. It was fantastic to speak to him and get his thoughts on over 20 years at the club. Very much looking forward to that, not least because I've heard it already. Yeah, no, looking forward to that very much. And we will also be talking about the worrying news with regards to the bookmakers and the next manager of Preston North End. And a practice game as well to reflect on from today. And we'll look at some of the Wycombe Wanderers players who are on international duty, /have been on international duty as well. But first, we best reflect on a point against Coventry, which, on reflection, seems like a pretty decent result. Yeah, definitely. The fact that actually the last time we'd beaten Coventry was way back when in the League Cup, when actually we came close. If you remember that game, when Premier League Coventry came to Adams Park, and we went 3-0 up. In the first half, in the second leg, it looked like we might pull off an unlikely victory, but no, it didn't happen in the end. Since then, we've not beaten or even got a draw against Coventry in 9 meetings. But finally, on Saturday, the 10th meeting, yes, we actually managed to get a point. It wasn't a particularly exciting game, but even so, it's a point that we will take, even though we really could have done with all 3. Because I'm sure many do follow your Twitter updates on a Saturday /Tuesday /Wednesday sometimes, and it was interesting that your kind of thoughts on well, especially on what Gareth was wearing. It's important that we get that up to date as well. His attire is important, but also how Wycombe start a game, I think, is quite key, and seem to start pretty well. Yes, they did. Yes, so with regards to my Twitter updates, if people wonder about them, I am very much aware that actually the club do update via Twitter, and there's various other people that you can follow that will give you a very accurate description of the game. So I try to go for something slightly more alternative, which is why occasionally then I do comment on what Gareth's wearing, because not least because I think actually it's always quite a good indicator, because he clearly is quite a superstitious guy, so you can sort of tell what he's thinking. We haven't seen the dragon skin boots for a while, but that again, that's always a bit of an indicator. The game against Coventry, really, I think probably they must have gone in at half-time wondering how on earth it was still 0-0, because actually, they definitely had the better of the first half, and certainly the hearts were in mouths a good few times. I think really we only had one notable chance that I wrote down on my notes, which was a Joe Jacobson free kick, surprise, finding Ryan Tafazoli, and Abral Masquet in the end, his shot was blocked by Coventry. But in the second second half, we were much, much better. Anis Mehmeti was really good in the second half, caused lots and lots of problems. And so it was a real surprise that actually Gareth Ainsworth decided to take Anis off after 70 minutes. Fred came on, and to be fair, Fred actually continued in the role that Anis had created and did continue to play really, really well. But even so, you couldn't then help really thinking, well, actually, we could have maybe had Anis and Fred on at the same time. Really, I was feeling that Anis was our best player, and so it was a surprise to see that he was substituted. I am a complete, in Gareth we trust and whatever, but I felt it was a curious decision to take Anis off on Saturday when really we really did need all 3 points.
Well, we said this before as well, though, but whenever you see a team sheet, you do think we're so lucky with the attacking players that we have, both in the starting lineup and also on the bench as well.
Yeah, it's been amazing, our bench this year, and you look at it, and the fact we're now allowed to have 9 players on the bench, you sort of look at it and you almost think, blimey, that's a team. That would be a decent team, certainly going forward anyway. So was the case again on Saturday. The fact that, that we're able to then bring on Daryl Horgan, Gareth McCleary, we brought on Bayo as well. There are goals in that side, and particularly somebody like Bayo, if you're a defender, and you've given your all for 80 minutes, and then you see Bayo coming on, you're not going to be best pleased. You're going to be thinking, oh goodness me, this is going to be another 10-15 minutes of hassle and having to be at my absolute best.
And who else kind of really stood out for you in terms of Wycombe players? Again, great to have Mr. Stockdale in goal, who's been doing really well. Obviously, another clean sheet.
Yeah, another clean sheet, and definitely saved us a good few times in the first half in particular. He did really, really well. It's been curious this season with regards to the goalkeepers, hasn't it? Because before Ryan Alsop got injured, we were saying, goodness me, definitely Ryan Alsop, player of the season, no doubt about it whatsoever. And David Stockdale came in and has played as well, if not better than Ryan Alsop. And so you slightly think with regards to, player of the season, could we have position of the season? Because definitely the goalkeepers have been absolutely fantastic.
You could literally work your way through the team, couldn't you, and just pick out every game, really. There's so many of them that do so well and obviously give so much to a game as well.
Yeah, definitely. And again, that's why it's so frustrating to be where we are, in the table, and thinking, well, now we've only got 8 games to save ourselves, because I know we've said it time and again on this program, the performances have been better than the results, and the performances have deserved better results. I know that that's pointless. I know that, it's not figure skating, for example. You don't get points for artistic merit or for effort, but it's very much not been the case that actually, every game we've looked at it and we thought, oh goodness me, we just weren't in that today. It hasn't been like that at all. I think 2 games out of the 38 that we've played so far, you could say, well, yeah, we weren't really in that. And all the others, the players have given their absolute all. And I can completely understand why, after most games, Gareth is still saying the same thing. And I know he gets a bit of stick for it on social media, on Twitter and things, but when he says proud of the lads, you can completely understand why he's saying that, because they have performed, I think to the best of their ability.
I must commend you as well on the inclusion of the expression figure skating. I think we should try and get more sport mentions on the show each week as well.
Yeah, okay, I'll see what I can do between now and 8 o'clock.
Figure skating, love it. And let's get Gareth's thoughts. He spoke to the media after the game.
It's a good side, they've got some good players in their team, and coming here, the pitch wasn't great for football, which I'm sure is affecting Mark at the moment. He likes to play. Just lads gave me the best, just a little bit of quality at times, but I think we restricted Coventry's quality as well, so gave him a few chances, but usually a point away from home in the Championship and a clean sheet is brilliant, but we need wins, and we were trying to go for it at the end, set plays, just that little moment of quality at the end. But listen, my boys gave me everything. How can I be disappointed with that? It's tough in this league, but we go again on Good Friday against Blackburn. We've got a rest now, but pleased with the efforts as always.
Yeah, given where you've come from, is it unrealistic to expect you to sort of take the game to sides like Coventry, or do you think you could play a bit more?
To anyone in this league, to try and dominate possession and take the game to people is tough for us. I think that there has to be a mini revolution in the way we play and the players we bring in, and that obviously it's finances and things. But I've got unbelievable honours. Rob Couig, Pete Couig, Missy Couig, they're right behind this slow revolution here that we're going to try and do, and we've got a long-term plan to to either stay in this league or definitely come back to this league. And again, I'm really positive. It's not over yet, no chance. We're still going to be battling hard, you know. And who says we can't win every game we've got left? You know, these things do happen. Just didn't stick it in the net today. Some great positives again, but no, it's a 0-0 away from home. It's getting better against Coventry. Don't usually get anything out of these lots, so I'm taking that as a positive.
A point against Coventry, it's got to be good, hasn't it?
It's got to be good, hasn't it?
That's
you can always tell when he's speaking to a local reporter, can't you? You know, is it unrealistic for you to take the game to a side like Coventry? Sorry, is the table upside down or something? You know, Coventry are down the bottom. You know, if he was from Norwich, well, fair enough.
Gareth sort of laughed there, didn't he? It's sort of like, you haven't seen us play before, have you?
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear.
But the style of play obviously is something that, I'm sure, many other teams look at as well and think, or Gareth is quite proud of as well, that we can make it difficult for other teams to play against us.
Yeah, completely. And, and we did do that against Coventry. And yes, we've got this millstone slightly around our neck that says that actually, we never even get a point against Coventry. Well, luckily that's now gone. But yeah, we performed, as well as we possibly could have done, I think, particularly in the second half. I think first half performance, yes, I'm sure there were a few words said at half time. But yes, second half, absolutely fine. Could have easily snuck it at the end. Fred had a few opportunities, in the last 10 minutes to win it for Wycombe. And, and goodness me, had that happened, we certainly would have been ignoring the slightly boring nature of the game and the fact that Coventry definitely had more chances in the first half than us.
I'm really interested in Gareth talking up this long-term plan to either stay in the division or at least, return to it as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's, that is really good and sounds realistic. If we could become a side, say, like Rotherham that actually, yes, does start bouncing between the two divisions, well, absolutely fine, because eventually you will hopefully have a good enough squad and you will hopefully make enough money to actually be able to put in a decent shot at surviving in the Championship. Again, I think you have to just think of actually the resources that some of the teams, and this doesn't really apply to Coventry, but some of the other teams that we face this season, where there's millions and millions of pounds, on display, of the opposition, and we haven't got anything like that. And it's to Gareth and to the Coohigs absolute credit that we've managed to get the decent players that we have this season. We do probably have the best team that Wycombe Wanderers has ever had in their history currently in the squad, and let's just keep our fingers crossed that actually, next season, we can keep a lot of those players. I think, it's only realistic, particularly players like Anis Mehmeti, probably that will keep them for another season, unless we do happen to go up. So let's make the absolute best of them, and ensure that actually next season we do go up, preferably automatically, from League One.
A special mention to Pete Cowick, whose birthday is today. Happy birthday.
It is. Yes.
Really interesting as well that you're saying about it's important because you do feel like the club is really building something in the players that we have, so it'd be fantastic to be able to keep hold of them as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that with the loan players as well, it will be really good if we've, as I'm sure we have, we've looked after players such as Josh Knight. If Leicester fancied allowing him to come back and be with us for another season, that will be fantastic. I don't know whether that will happen. The fact that he's obviously been on loan in the Championship this season, I would imagine that they'll want him to stay at that level. But at the same time, I think the great thing about Wycombe is that actually, clearly they are a family club. They do look after the players when they come. We know that just the number of players that actually have returned to Adams Park, who clearly left and then realised what a great place it is. So you never know. Hopefully a player like Josh Knight may well, hang around, if Brendan Rodgers is kind enough to allow him.
And something else which is a nice perk, I think is the right word, of being in the Championship is having the international break off, which is something which has not been experienced before, and to have internationals on international duty as well.
Yes, I mean, that is a bit of a surprise, isn't it? I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of the international break, particularly when England are playing teams like San Marino, because that's not exactly something that you get particularly excited about. But it's a perk of being in the Championship, and just like the fact that we haven't had to play this year in the Papa John's Leasing.com checker trade, whatever it's called, let's enjoy all of those little perks.
Really nice to see Daryl Horgan in representing the Republic of Ireland, although he didn't actually feature last night. But and also great news for another young Wycombe player.
Yeah, so Andre Burley was become the 9th chairboy to be capped. So he played for St Kitts and Nevis, who play in the CONCACAF region, which is basically the North American and Caribbean region of football. So they beat Puerto Rico 1-0 last night, which actually I thought was a bit of a surprise, but actually it turns out it isn't, because they've got a much better FIFA ranking than Puerto Rico.
At least they weren't playing San Marino.
No. Well, they probably would have beaten them as well, I expect.
And we heard a couple of weeks ago with Mark Rogers talking about his pride about being on the board, not the board of directors, but the board at Adams Park of internationals.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic for the club that we are getting these internationals. And particularly Darryl Horgan, very impressive. The fact that he's playing for the Republic of Ireland, and Wycombe. When we're talking about players hanging about, again, he's one of those ones that we're definitely meaning, and has obviously played for the Republic of Ireland. Yes, he was an unused substitute last night when they lost to Serbia. Maybe that's why they lost.
It could have influenced them in that way.
Definitely, yeah.
Still to come on this week's Wycombe Wanderers show, we'll hear from Dion Dublin, surprise, ex-Wycombe Wanderers player. We'll reflect on this afternoon's practice match, and we'll hear from long-serving former Wycombe Wanderers physio next.
This is Wycombe Sound.
Welcome back to the second half of the Wycombe Wanderers show. If you're a regular listener, you'll know that we teamed up with the Wycombe Wanderers Ex-Players Association to bring you each week, without fail, pretty much. There was a week where we nearly failed, but this week, no exception. An international break, a bit of a treat for you. I've been speaking to someone who spent over 20 years at the club. David Jones was the club's physio, worked with so many players, and I've been speaking to him about his memories at the club, starting off with how he very first started.
I was working in a local village team, Kidlington, and they were in the Hellenic League at the time. I'd had to stop playing because of a very nasty back problem, and I then became the therapist and looked after the players. And David Burgess called me one day. He was playing at Wycombe, and he would come and see me to save him travelling over to Wycombe if he had injuries. And he rang me to say that Shay, the therapist who was looking after the team at the time, was having a bit of difficulty because they'd moved into the conference and to getting some time off, and could I cover some of the games? So I remember jumping on the bus one day and we went up to Kidderminster Harriers, and Kim Casey just ran riot that day. Shay carried on running and working with the club, and then decided that he was calling it a day. And so I got a phone call from David Burgess again, asked if I was interested in working for the club in a part-time basis, and I gleefully accepted the offer. It was an amazing football club. So I came over and worked with Alan Gain, had a meeting with Alan Gain, and we got on absolutely brilliantly. And it was the start of something that I will never ever forget. It was a fantastic time.
What were your first impressions when you arrived at the club and that's the job that needed doing?
Oh, I was in awe of everything, to be perfectly frank with you. And it was just a brilliantly structured club, right from the top to the bottom. It was fantastic. And the players that we had at the time, suddenly Noel Ashford arrived and Keith Barrett arrived. And so was dealing with really, really high quality players. And it was awesome. And I learned so much, which was great.
And of course, people forget, or well, not forget, but perhaps don't realise or appreciate that obviously these are non-league, obviously at this time, and part-time players as well. And it must have been quite a job to kind of maintain the players at that time.
Oh, it was incredible. And when you think about the players, particularly even when we were in the conference and we were travelling, we would very often leave at 2:00 in the afternoon to get up to Manchester somewhere to play Altrincham or somewhere like that on a Tuesday evening. And the boys would have worked. They'd got up at 7:00 in the morning, gone to do their normal job. Then we would have picked them up en route. We would play the game against Altrincham, and then they would be getting home at 1 or 2:00 in the morning, and then they'd have to be back at work the following morning. And those players, it was incredible. I can remember in the latter stages when we got promoted from the conference with Martin O'Neill's team, and We played on the Saturday. We flew on the Sunday to Gateshead. We had played on the Thursday night previously to that. So we'd played, I think it was Saturday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. And the players were just getting time off work and adjusting their family lives so that they could just play those games. But it was an incredible time.
And what was it like working with the different managers? Because that must have been quite sort of something you had to adjust to in a way.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I saw lots of managers, and I have to say they were all great. And you have to learn to understand the manager. That's the incredible thing about it, Earl, is people find it's managers come in and people are at the football club, and you've got to learn how to work with a manager. And if it doesn't work out, then you just have to move on. And I was very, very fortunate. I worked with all the managers, and I really enjoyed working with them as well.
There must be as well such a lot of pressure on your kind of role, because the manager will want you to get, if a player's out injured, they want you to get them back to fitness as quickly as possible, and you'll be saying to them all, can't really rush them back, or there's only so much you can do. But on the other hand, it must be really rewarding when you can help a player back to full fitness.
I mean, at the end of the day, the manager's paid to get results for the team. The team he builds, he's got all his assets. He wants all his assets on the pitch. The football club wants all their assets on the pitch. And so you're busy trying to balance all of that out, because sometimes, you could have a player that was very nearly ready to play, but hadn't trained. And then it was always a gamble. You never knew whether they were going to get through that game and whether they would be set back. So, sometimes it's not sometimes how quickly you get them back, but it's how long they stay back after they've returned back to playing. And that was always my philosophy. Sometimes you have to be a little bit slower getting them there, but once they go back, you know that they're not going to break down.
And I guess especially challenging must be dealing with players with especially long-term injuries, not just their physical, but also the kind of mental side of it as well.
Oh, it's the mental side of it is incredibly powerful. But what's very interesting with the footballers is that there's a tremendous camaraderie in the changing room with them. And when players get injured, it's just not the player isn't the only person who is upset. It's the whole team feels for that player. And so they sort of create a bubble around them and try and support the players as they get, when they become injured and they start to go through their recovery process. One of the things that when I started, and particularly once we moved down to Adams Park, we had the lovely facility that Monty Seymour helped put some money in so we could have a gym, and we had some exercise bikes and things like that. So what I always tried to do was to do a little bit of a fitness session with the players, probably lasting up to an hour, where they would do different exercises. But it was always a little bit competitive. I learnt that off a good friend of mine and a mentor who set up Lillishall, the rehab centre, many years ago. And by getting the players to do all their exercises together and work together, doing a fitness program within inside that structure seemed to keep the injured players together. And it helped them through, rather than each one of them just running their own little individual exercise program. We would always have a collective process at the end where there would be a good heart pumping session of exercise. And it was competitive, so everybody was trying to push themselves along, and I felt that was a very, very important component in the rehabilitation processes that I used to follow.
You mentioned the facilities. That must have been something which really boosted your work as you sort of progressed, really, because you say about the switch from Lokes Park to Adams Park and working with the sports centre as well. A lot of players would use the pool. Yeah,
well, we when we went full time, we needed lots of facilities. So if you think about the old football clubs, and even when we were in the Football League, we would go to some of the older football clubs, and the medical room was probably as long as a couch and slightly wider than a couch. And that was what they would use. When we went to Aston Villa for the FA Cup semi-final, the whole of the Veer suite was probably the size of the home dressing room's medical department. So that gives you an idea of the enormity of how it's changed. So the medical side, when I arrived, we decided that I wanted to do some swimming sessions, some cardiovascular swimming sessions that would allow the players to keep fit when they were injured. So we went to the Wycombe Sports Centre, and they were very kind to us and very, very extremely helpful. And they allowed us to use the diving pit. And we could do little sessions in there where we'd have players treading water and heading a football back and then swapping over. And then we would do catching while they were treading water. So they didn't have to do anything too complicated. But by using a ball in all those processes, it kept their eye-to-hand coordination and eye-to-head coordination going. But it also was tremendously hard work cardiovascularly, and it kept them very fit. So when they were ready, when their injury was better, they were able to go back and play without too much of a problem. We also had a fantastic cycle shop in Wycombe that we did a sponsorship deal with them, and they very kindly provided 5 mountain bikes. So some people would be driving their cars and might have seen some of the players going around, and they used to ride out towards Stokenchurch and up through Chips Hill and round the back through Marlow and back down. So they would have all those sorts of things that kept them really, really very, very fit.
It must have been fascinating for you as well, in the different innovations in physiotherapy and techniques and ways to work with players as well. That's how that sort of developed for you as well.
Well, that was happening towards the latter end, and one of the things that had always evolved in football is that there was suddenly a huge emphasis. And I can remember Laurie Sanchez doing his pro license, and one of the things that came out of that pro license was that hamstring injuries were the longest and the most prolific injury that footballers could get. And they asked all the managers on the pro license at the time, what were they doing to try and prevent those injuries happening? And so that's when the sports scientists started to move into the clubs, and they then became basically developing the fitness training programs and monitoring what was going on in training. And it slowly have evolved. And so I was kind of in that process. I was doing a lot of my fitness work with the players. So rather than just doing physiotherapy, I was actually doing fitness work with the injured players to keep them fit, and then giving them back to the managers. And then so I think it was Pete Corley was the first person that came into the club who really is under the title of fitness coach. And so he would then start to take them through different programs and specific running drills that would train the heart to work in different ways. And, there was always a thing in football that players might think they might like to go out for a long plodding run. But to coin a Martin O'Neill expression, they end up everywhere the ball's just been because they're a plodder and they don't run fast and have small breaks. And so that training changed to evolve and incorporate much more different types of training than just running around playing football.
And one of the things that must be so rewarding in your role is that the influence and effect you're able to have on players. I saw a fantastic quote from Will Antwi. You said that he wouldn't have had as much of a career if it wasn't for you.
Well, that's a lovely thing to hear, and he's a super man, Will, and it's just really, really sad that his career took so long to get going. But it's kind of an interesting one because without going into too many details, he'd had quite an innocuous injury quite a number of years earlier that hadn't really healed and been looked after as well as it could have been done. And so that consequently knocked on and caused all his problems further along the line. And really it was just a matter of trying to unwind the problems to get him back to working and his body functioning normally. But what a fantastic footballer Will was when he played, and it was enjoyable working. But they all the footballers and the players that I've worked with all bring something different to the changing room, and it's incredible. Sometimes, I always remember the big centre-half that went to Portsmouth and then went to Newcastle, Mike Williamson. And, he really grew up, unfortunately, when he hurt his knee, because he had to take responsibility for this problem he had and then make himself a footballer again. And it's sometimes not only is it a matter of trying to get them to be strong and get their knees better, but they've got to be mentally strong to go through the process of getting better. And people sometimes think that an operation will make them better. But unfortunately, it's the rehabilitation process after that that's needed. The surgeon does the operation and puts the bits that are in the wrong place back together again. But that joint has now had huge trauma applied to it. And then it's a process of building yourself up. And we don't realise sometimes how hard that is. And it's a really, really difficult journey, both mentally and physically. And so players tend to sort of grow up in that period and turn into what I call real big men. To give you an example of the sort of quality of the determination and strength of some of the players that we had, the likes of your Keith Ryans, your Terry Evanses, your Matt Crossleys, and many, many more of the players that have been through Wycombe Wanderers. I think the story of Glyn Creaser, who, as many of you will remember, just as we got into the Football League time, he was involved in an accident at work where he was hit by a forklift truck. And fortunately, Crease came off slightly better than the forklift truck. But what happened was that he had fractured his heel bone. And this injury will leave many, many people with a limp for the rest of their lives. And so he was looked after magnificently up in close to where he lived, and a surgeon was looking after him in that vicinity. And so we'd been working with Glyn, and we'd slowly built him up, and we'd be monitoring his progress very, very carefully. And he finally went up for an all-clear appointment with the surgeon. And at that appointment, he had told Glyn that he was back jogging. And so a few weeks later, this letter arrived from the surgeon, and it was all typed as they officially are. And at the bottom, there's a very big bold ink signature. And underneath it said, "What a remarkable recovery. What a remarkable man." And I think that just summarises the types of people that worked and played for Wycombe Wanderers.
Because it's great to think about injuries that years ago might have perhaps even ended a player's career, but now they can recover from much more quickly.
Yeah, and you're right, and it's the equipment, it's what they do and how they can rebuild tissue. We're led very much by evidence-based medicine, and the guys are experts in it. When we think about poor Sean Devine, when he had that problem with his knee, we travelled all the way to Oswald Street to see a gentleman who, an orthopaedic specialist up there, a chap called Di Rees, who specialised in the problem that Sean had. So there's knee surgeons, and then there was knee surgeons who specialised in particular areas. And so we would travel all the way up to see Di Rees with Sean because he was a specialist in the problem that Sean had.
And did you find that, obviously, I guess players would come to you with particular problems that obviously you'd come across before, but that there, I'm sure, were sort of less common types of injuries as well that perhaps more difficult to treat or more challenging to kind of get them back, if you like, from?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. The one thing that I learnt in sport very, very quickly is you always expect the unexpected. And, it's the ones that you don't really understand when the player falls in the back of the goal and you can't quite fathom out what they did and how they did it and why they did it. And so they were always the innocuous ones. And Paul Emblem's ankle, the poor chap, he just ran chasing a centre-half, and as the centre-half's heel came up, Paul Emblem's foot just landed on his heel and his ankle went in and out and in and out. And he carried on playing for 15 minutes and then came to the bench and said, "I don't know what's wrong with my ankle, but it's really sore." And unfortunately, he'd caused massive damage to his ankle in that just that small little incident, which nobody really ever could see.
And it must be so nice for you as well when you're able to convert, if that's the right word, people to physiotherapy as well. I know it must be a fantastic story that, Terry Evans with his injuries, and he got into physio himself as a result of, I think, kind of recuperating from his problems.
Terry arrived at the football club and he had 2 very, very nasty knees. And Martin O'Neill just said to me, keep him on the pitch, David. I don't mind how you do it. Just keep him on the pitch. So that's when we were using all the work and the techniques and tricks I'd learnt from Lillishall of different bike exercises so that we could keep him as fit as we could just on an exercise bike so his knees weren't too irritated. Used to take him swimming and he was a great mentor to the other players and he loved the swimming, so he enjoyed it and it was a bit of fun and a bit of banter. But it was very, very hard work. And so we managed to keep Terry playing, and I think Terry got another 4 or 5 years out of his knees before they finally sort of decided that they were getting a bit grumpy. But it was a perfect transition for him to go into that profession, to be honest with you. He's a player. He knows players' minds. He understands players. It doesn't matter whether it's a football player or a rugby player. He understands their mentality. And Terry has got the most amazing hands. I still see Terry. He looks after some of my students, and they go down and they spend a year learning how to deal with injuries under Terry's guidance. But he's got amazing hands, and for such a big man, he can feel very, very carefully and very gently with those hands, and so he understands the rigors and demands of the sport. So no, it's been lovely. It's a lovely success story, and it's we chat regularly, probably once or twice a month. We talk things through, and so no, it's lovely to see Terry doing so well.
And what was the transition like for yourself from just being a physio to becoming working more sort of the sports science, as you say?
Well, Steve Hayes asked me to come in and head up a sports medicine department, so it was more bringing in the fitness component and making sure that the medical department was running as well as it could possibly do. And so it was a bit of a transition because I knew the club and I understood what was needed. It was just a matter of trying to head that up and make sure that it ran as effectively as it possibly could. What's kind of interesting now is that I was having a conversation with somebody who works at the FA, and he was telling me now what the blueprint is for every football club's academy, and that's what we were doing then. And so we've always felt that slightly ahead of the times all the time and ahead of the curve. And so we had people in who looked after the players' nutrition. We had people coming in looking after doing the podiatry, making sure their feet were in good conditions. We just basically tried to be very holistic over looking after all the players' aspects of the players' welfare, to be honest.
You're listening to the Wycombe Wanderer Show here at Wycombe Sound. Fantastic to get the thoughts and memories of former physio David Jones. You do have to have some sympathy for a forklift truck which comes into contact with Glyn Creaser, and both of whom don't come off too well. Still to come, we'll be finding out what kept David at the club for such a long time and what he's up to these days here at Wycombe Sound.
This is Wycombe Sound.
Final part of the Wycombe Wanderer Show for this week. Still to come, a surprise sort of appearance from former Wycombe Wanderers player Dion Dublin after appearing on this morning's Mid-Morning. We'll also be reflecting on a practice match which happened at Adams Park this afternoon with a number of first-team players, some trialists and Ebbsfleet United, which was witnessed accidentally by Luke from Drive Time, who took photos and everything, which we'll realise will be appearing on our branding, I suppose you call it. Meantime, though, we're catching up with former Wycombe Wanderers physio David Jones, who's at the club for more than 20 years, looking after a number of players. We've been getting his thoughts and memories, including what kept him at the club for such a long period of time.
It was just a fantastic club. I cried my eyes out when I left. I decided it was time to move on. I'd got to an age, my two sons were growing up, and I felt that I needed just to be around home a little bit more. I also realised that it was time myself. I needed a new challenge, and so I decided it was time to go. I took a job over at the University of Hertfordshire, and a lecturing position. But, Wycombe is an interesting thing. You look at Alan Hutchinson, he loves the club. And everybody loves the football club who's been there. There's not many people that don't like Wycombe Wanderers Football Club having been there. They've realised that it's a very privileged position and it's the most amazing club. And you've got some of the most amazing people who work there as well. They seem to attract very, very high quality, good people to the football club. And it's a great testament to the football club. And it's a family in many respects. And I probably didn't quite realise just how big a family it was until my late wife became unwell. And the support from the players and staff at the football club was absolutely amazing. And as you can hear, it makes me a bit emotional just even thinking about it.
Of course.
And when we went, I turned up at arrived at my wife's funeral, just all I saw was people from the football club, which was amazing.
No, that is lovely. And the calibre of players that you worked with as well must have made your work so enjoyable as well, and the characters of them as well.
Oh, it was probably the biggest character in many respects right at the very beginning that sort of made my eyes open up was Noel Ashford. And he was such a lovely character and a very, very funny man. And so, he arrived and then there was all sorts of characters all the way along the line, and it was lovely to see them all. And Chuck Musovic under Martin O'Neill, and he used to entertain the players, and he was a real character. But all the players had character. Every player was different, but they all had characters. But there were some very, very funny people around at the football club during my time.
Because that's something that seems to be quite unique to football, isn't it? There aren't many sort of work sort of situations where you get that kind of camaraderie.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think that, but when you think about it in a realistic sort of sense, and you go back to when you're working, you'd be on a bus travelling up 4 hours up to Manchester way. You'd be sitting having dinner in Manchester, then you'd be playing the next day, and then there'd be another 4 hours to come back home for 24 hours, and then you were back all in together. And so you're really very, very closely compressed, and you're also in a very stressful environment. So, people have to learn to get on with each other, and you are very, very close. With a job, normal sort of working job, you might go into work and you work for 8 hours and then you go home again, but you don't necessarily spend, days and days together in a week into such a high pressurized environment.
And it must be tricky over such a long period, but are there any particular kind of highlights or occasions that especially stand out from your time at the club? I imagine obviously the Wembley finals must be pretty up there.
I think one of the big standout ones was the semi-final that got us through. Keith Scott had been injured for a few weeks before playing in the semi-final, and then this was for the first trophy, having sort of lost in the first leg of the semi-final, or not did very well in the first leg, managed to get big Keith Scott fit, and Matt Crossley scored the 2 goals of the 4 I think we scored that day. That was tremendous. And then going to Wembley, I mean, what a privilege just to go to Wembley, and not only go to Wembley, but to win twice, 3 times. Then we went to Wembley and played in the 5-a-side tournament, turned up, and the boys just decided that they weren't going to get beaten in it. And so we just went out and won the 5-a-side tournament. So it's been extremely fortunate. FA Cup semi-final. I suddenly was watching the television a few weeks ago, and suddenly that came up about the highlights, and it was the game when we beat Wimbledon in that semi-final replay. I hadn't been around for the game. I'd developed tonsillitis, so I'd been in bed most of the week, couldn't get to the Saturday game, but returned back to work again on the Monday, and we played Wimbledon on the Tuesday night. I mean, what an occasion that was.
And it must be really nice for you to, as you say, just to kind of reflect on such a happy time at the club.
Oh, I wouldn't swap it for the world, and in a very sort of selfish way, it's been a job of love. I've just loved every minute of it. There was never a day. One of the things with the job is that nothing was ever mundane. You know, you never knew what you were going to face the next morning when you went into work. It might have rained, it might have snowed, it might have frozen. Somebody might be unwell. Something needed to be changed, something needed to be chased. The job was different every day, and everybody wanted to do well. So there was always great people around. And I mean, Jim Gardner and I spent an awful lot of time together, and he's the most amazing gentleman. Great company, a lovely person to have around. So, you know, we made it a lovely working environment for each other as well.
And are you enjoying the lecturing as well? Because I imagine that's pretty rewarding too, but in a slightly different way. Yeah,
I do. I have to say that when I first went into academia, it was incredibly slow compared to working in football. And it was a very slow, very much like a football season, started and finished. The academic year arrives, it's all exciting. And then it becomes a long, hard session, come out at the other end with the final exams. Lovely and rewarding to see the students grow over the 3 years or 4 years that they're with us. So that's absolutely fantastic. And I also work in a private physiotherapy clinic over in Oxford, the Bosworth Clinic. And I've known Gordon. He came when Adams Park had just been built, and he ran some first aid courses and basic treatment of injury courses for the FA there. When Brian Lee was chairman, and we've always kept in touch. And so Gordon asked me to go and work at his clinic. And so Gordon headed up the British athletics for the Olympic Games in London. So it's fantastic having that opportunity just to work with other people who've worked at such a high level, and even higher level than I've worked at.
Well, it's been fantastic to speak to you, and really great to share your memories. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Really great to catch up with David Jones, and as I say, to share his memories and thoughts on a fantastic role over such a period at the club.
Yeah, absolutely lovely interview. And once again, you can just hear actually what a fantastic club we have and that we support. And aren't we lucky to have it? You know, just everything that David was saying about what a supportive place it is. And I thought what was really brilliant about it was just, you know, for clearly for such a long time, through so many different eras, actually, you know, that it has been this amazing club. And, you know, just really, really nice to hear all of his stories.
And when you think the amount of managers that he's worked under as well, like Paul Lambert and John Gorman and Tony Adams, and not in this order, and and Laurie Sanchez and Martin O'Neill, obviously, and Alan Gain and Peter Sibley as well. There's so many.
Yeah, definitely. You know, that was what really, really came across, was very much, you know, he's been in it for very much the long haul, and, you know, has seen so many managers actually come and go, which again must just be absolutely fascinating to see the different ways that they operate and that they work. But yeah, really, really good interview. And very interesting to hear as well about the different players, in particular Glyn Creaser and, you know, the forklift truck, which
you've got to have some sympathy for the forklift, haven't you?
You do really, don't you? And also you can just imagine it, you know, when the players get injured, and these days they don't actually tell you very much about the injury, they just normally put it in brackets after the player's name, and you can imagine sort of it saying Creaser forklift truck. You know, just fantastic. What a good story.
So talking of former members of the club, you've been chatting to another former player today to explain a bit about how this came about.
Seriously, don't get too excited about this, because it doesn't last very long.
We built up to this too much.
Yeah. So in our capacity as mid-morning presenters, because Colin and I, we don't only do the mid-morning show. We don't only do the Wycombe Wonder show. We do the mid-morning show as well, although we don't do the mid-morning show together. We present that separately. But anyway, we get offered all sorts of different guests to come on the show. And anyway, this week we got offered Dion Dublin. And I thought, oh great, you know, that'll be really interesting. Maybe we can either speak to him about football, or we can talk to him about Homes Under the Hammer. Anyway, no, actually they were offering him, he was coming on to talk about fraud, because he runs his own business, and has had a few run-ins, where he has nearly been scammed. So that's why he was coming on. But I did also speak to him about the fact that actually, he did appear for the Chairboys a couple of times.
For you stressed as well. We don't do the mid-morning show together. We don't do that. It's important. Don't think that we do. because we really don't.
Because I know that we get quite a few comments from people saying, "Oh, I really love the humour between you two and the way that you work together."
That's not on mid-mornings. That's not what it's about. We don't do that.
Well, I didn't want people to be tuning in then mid-mornings tomorrow at 10 a.m. Oh, great! Colin and Bob, they do a show every weekday between 10 and 1, and then be disappointed when it's just me.
Oh, I won't be disappointed. Just want to make that clear. We don't do that together.
We don't do that. No, maybe we should one day. Maybe we should do a mid-morning. That'd be top fun. See how it goes.
Here's Bob chatting to former Wycombe Wanderers forward Dion Dublin.
Do you remember playing for Wycombe Wanderers back in 1988, I believe it was?
Yes, I do. I think I was on loan from Cambridge, and I think I played a few games on the enormous slope that you had on that pitch back in the day.
That's exactly what I was going to say to you, is you must have played at Lokes Park, and so do you remember, because everyone talks about Lokes Park and says about the slope.
Yeah, because I remember, actually, I don't know who the skipper was at the time, because I remember every time he won the toss, kick downhill, let's get as many goals as possible. If the wind was going that way as well, the poor team had no idea. We'd be about 4 up by half time.
Yeah, absolutely. We should have never moved to Adams Park. This season in the Championship, we'd still be in the Championship if we had that slope.
You probably would be, actually.
Yeah.
Good club. Been a good club, Woven club for years.
Yeah, absolutely. And fingers crossed. We're still 8 games to go. You never know if anyone can pull it off. Gareth Ainsworth is the man.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Gareth's he just epitomises Wycombe, the place, Wycombe, the football club, the way he goes about his business. He's a good coach, he's a good manager, and I just think he stayed true to himself as well, which I think is brilliant.
Dion Dublin speaking to Bob earlier on this morning, and if you'd like to hear more of Dion's thoughts on fraud, you can check out the Listen Again feature on the website.
It was interesting hearing Dion's thoughts about fraud.
And of course he had so many clubs. I love the way that he started off the interview and you say, "Oh, do you remember playing for Wycombe Wanderers?" "Oh, I think I can." And he was just like, sloping pitch. Yes, that's it.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, it was a long time ago now. So what was it? 33 years ago. So I can understand him having slight trouble remembering, but I think he did. And in all seriousness, really interesting, because once again, another person saying, just praising the club, saying how fantastic we are, and what a great club and how well organised it is, and again, that was going back to 1988. So really nice to speak to him and really interesting.
No, a real kind of source of pride of everyone connected with the club. We better reflect on a practice match which happened this afternoon as well against Ebbsfleet.
Yes, absolutely. So we won 2-0 this afternoon against Ebbsfleet. Alex Samuel scoring and Scott Cashgett. Quite a lot of first-team players involved, a few trialists as well. Alex Patterson also playing most of the game. I think Scott Cashgett also played quite a lot of the game as well. But yes, a good run-out, I think. Interesting, though, that actually it was most of the first team. Very much sort of, if you remember back before the season started, we were talking sort of about the B team and the fact that actually they would be playing games, but unless they're doing that very secretly, I haven't really noticed the B team playing many games.
No. And obviously Anis, who was intended for the B team, he's been sort of promoted fairly rapidly as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, the one main B team player didn't last very long before he got promoted up to the A team, and then players like Andre Burley, who are in the B team now actually getting international call-ups.
And trialist CB, I can confirm that wasn't me.
That wasn't you. Okay. I will confess that I'm sitting here at the moment having half an eye on England against San Marino, but very much only half an eye. And I've only just realised that actually England are playing in blue and San Marino are playing in white. Oh. And a few times I've nearly said to you, "Goodness me, San Marino are playing really well." And I've actually just realised that I've got the teams the wrong way round.
That is confusing. I think last night Belgium were playing at home in their away kit, and Wales had some sort of gold and green sort of.
Well, we've got a very bizarre blue kit on that I've never ever seen us wear before.
Well, and it's
looks
probably
much more like, I was at the last England-San Marino game at Wembley, which we won 6-0, and it was the most boring 6-0 I've ever seen. And I'm fairly sure, I'm almost certain that San Marino were wearing exactly the same kit that England have got on at the moment. And whereas England, I'm sure, were in the all-whites that San Marino are wearing. It's very confusing.
It's like the message, if you're watching in black and white, that we're playing in white.
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of a bit like, I don't know, England are catfishing and pretending to be San Marino tonight.
Oh yes, I've just seen the blue kit. It looks a bit like the Dutch sort of away kit almost.
Yes, it does. Yeah,
and probably very expensive as well. If you want to get yourself a replica version of that.
Yes, but of course, all of the kids will be wanting it now, having seen England play San Marino in it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The different England away kits, because we're used to having them in red, of course, I suppose, as an away.
Well, I'm very much a traditionalist with these things. Surprise, surprise. Yes,
and not a fan of San Marino, it appears.
It's fine about San Marino. I do think that there should be some sort of European pre-qualifying, so that actually, the San Marinos and the Liechtensteins, if not for anything else, can actually then play competitive games against each other and improve. Whereas I think the fact that San Marino, and I know that's now being addressed through the Nations League, which I think is a really, really good idea. But yeah, when it's, England against San Marino, you do think, well, yeah, there is actually going to be one winner. And it's the fact that actually we always make quite hard work of these games these days. Where I remember the days of us beating like Luxembourg 9-0 and putting 8 past Turkey when Turkey really weren't a very good footballing nation. Whereas, these days we'll struggle probably today, and we'll probably still win 4-5 or 6-0. And afterwards, Gareth Southgate will come out and say, oh, there's no easy games in international football anymore.
If you've just tuned in, this is the international part of the international break on the Wycombe Wanderers show.
We've got to reflect what's going on in the football world.
No, absolutely.
One thing that we haven't mentioned, incidentally, is that Gareth is no longer the favourite to take over as Preston North End manager, which is good news. Nicky Butt, you may well have read in the papers and on the internet, has left his coaching position at Manchester United for a new challenge. And it was partly thought that maybe he was going to join Wayne Rooney at Derby. However, he is now the 3-1 on favourite to take over as Preston North End manager. So that's good news, I think, for all of us at Wycombe Wanderers.
Absolutely, especially heading into the latter part of the season, which continues, of course. We've got next week's show, we're building up to 2 games on Good Friday and Easter Monday, of course.
Yes, it will be exciting, and I promise I won't go on too much about San Marino.
It'd be unusual if you did. It'd be a new weekly feature.
The San Marino feature with Dion Dublin on fraud.